They had dressed her in white, as if purity could mask their cruelty. Ilara stood at the edge of the forest, her bare feet numb against the frozen ground, her wrists bound with ceremonial rope that bit into her skin. Behind her, the village elders chanted prayers they didn't believe, their voices rising into the grey winter sky like smoke from a dying fire. She was the sacrifice. Every 10 years, the village of Thornhaven offered a maiden to the Lycan king, payment for peace, for protection from the wild packs that roamed the borderlands. For generations, the offering had been her honour. Families had volunteered their daughters, dressed them in silk and gold, sent them into the dark forest with pride. But times had changed. The old traditions had soured into something uglier. Now, no one volunteered. Now, they chose. And they had chosen her. Ilara was not surprised. She had no family to protect her, no father to protest, no mother to weep. The plague had taken them when she was 12, leaving her to survive on scraps and pity in a village that had never wanted her. She had grown up sleeping in the back of the baker's shop, earning her bread by scrubbing floors and washing linens until her hands cracked and bled. She was nothing. No one. The perfect sacrifice. "It is time," the head elder announced, his voice heavy with false solemnity. "May the Lycan king accept our offering and grant us another decade of peace." Accept, Ilara thought bitterly, as if she were a gift and not a death sentence. She had heard the stories. The Lycan king was ancient, 300 years old, some said. A monster who ruled the dark territories beyond the forest, whose wolves patrolled borders that no human dared cross. Some said he ate the sacrifices raw. Others claimed he kept them as slaves until he tired of them. No one knew for certain, because no sacrifice had ever returned. The ropes tugged at her wrists as 2 guards led her forward into the trees. The village disappeared behind her, swallowed by the mist that clung to the forest floor like a living thing. Ilara didn't look back. There was nothing to look back for. She walked for what felt like hours, the guards silent beside her, their faces pale with fear. They would leave her at the boundary stone and flee back to their safe homes, their warm fires. She would be alone when the wolves came. When they finally stopped, the sun had vanished behind the clouds, leaving the world colourless and cold. A massive stone marker rose from the earth ahead, carved with symbols Ilara didn't recognize. The boundary. "This is where we leave you," the younger guard said, unable to meet her eyes. He was perhaps 17, barely older than her own 19 years. She wondered if he felt guilty. She hoped he did. They cut her wrists free, a small mercy, and backed away without another word. Within moments, the sound of their footsteps faded into silence. Ilara was alone. She stood before the boundary stone, her white dress already soiled with mud and frost, her dark hair tangled from the wind. She could run. The thought flickered through her mind like a dying candle. She could turn and flee into the forest, try to find another village, another life. But where would she go? She had no money, no skills, no one waiting for her anywhere in the world. And even if she escaped, the Lycan King's wolves would hunt her down. They always did. Better to face death with dignity than to die exhausted and afraid in a frozen ditch. So she waited. The wolves came at dusk. She heard them before she saw them. The soft crunch of paws on snow, the low rumble of breath in massive chests. They emerged from the shadows like ghosts, their eyes glowing amber in the fading light. There were 6 of them, each larger than any wolf she had ever seen, their fur ranging from silver to black, to deep russet brown. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to remain still. "Don't run." Don't show fear? Not that it mattered. They would kill her regardless. But they didn't attack. Instead, the largest wolf, a great black beast with eyes like molten gold, approached her slowly, its head lowered, nostrils flaring. It circled her once, twice, then let out a sound that was almost confused. Before Ilara could react, the air around the wolf shimmered and shifted. Bones cracked and reformed. Fur receded into skin. And where the wolf had stood, a man now rose to his full height. He was enormous, easily a head taller than any man she had ever seen, with broad shoulders and a warrior's build. His hair was black as midnight, falling to his shoulders in waves, and his face was all sharp angles and brutal beauty, but it was his eyes that held her frozen in place. Gold. Burning. Inhuman gold. The Lycan king. He stared at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle, his nostrils flaring as if he was breathing her in. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he moved. Ilara flinched, expecting claws, expecting teeth, expecting the death she had been promised. Instead, warm fingers cupped her chin, tilting her face up toward his. His touch was impossibly gentle. "What is your name?" His voice was deep, rough, like stones grinding together. She swallowed hard. "Ilara." "Ilara," he repeated, and something flickered in those golden eyes, something she couldn't name. "They sent you as a sacrifice." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. The Lycan king's jaw tightened. His gaze swept over her. The thin white dress, the bruises on her wrists from the ropes, the hollows beneath her eyes from too many hungry nights. When he looked at her again, there was fury in his expression, but not at her. "Your village believes I am a monster who devours maidens," he said quietly. "They are fools. I have never harmed a single woman they have sent me. I give them sanctuary, safety, a life far better than whatever they fled." Ilara blinked, certain she had misheard. I don't understand." "No," he agreed. "You wouldn't. You expected death." His thumb traced her jaw, feather-light. "But I am not going to kill you, Ilara." "Then what?" "You are my mate." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, speechless, as his golden eyes burned into hers with uncertainty that left no room for doubt. "I have waited 300 years for you," he continued, his voice dropping to something low and reverent. "The moment I caught your scent on the wind, I knew. You are mine, my fated, my queen." Ilara's mind reeled. This couldn't be real. She was no one. A beggar girl, an orphan, a sacrifice chosen because she wouldn't be missed. She wasn't meant for kings. She wasn't meant for anything. "You've made a mistake," she whispered. The Lycan king smiled then, slow and fierce, and the expression transformed his brutal features into something almost unbearably beautiful. "I don't make mistakes." He released her chin and stepped back, extending his hand toward her. "Come with me, Ilara, not as a sacrifice, as my chosen." She stared at his outstretched hand, her heart pounding, her thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm. She had come here to die. Instead, the Lycan king was offering her a life she couldn't begin to imagine, and she had no idea what to do. She took his hand, not because she believed him, not because she trusted him, but because the alternative was standing alone in a frozen forest until she died of cold, or was eaten by something less civilized than the Lycan king. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady, and something in his expression softened. You won't regret this, Ilara. She didn't answer. She wasn't sure she believed that either. He led her deeper into the forest, the wolves falling into formation around them like a living shield. Ilara's legs ached from the cold, her thin dress offering no protection against the bitter wind, but she forced herself to keep moving. She would not stumble. She would not show weakness. She had learned long ago that weakness invited cruelty. The Lycan king glanced down at her, his golden eyes catching the moonlight. Without a word, he shrugged off his cloak. She hadn't even noticed he was wearing one, and draped it over her shoulders. The fabric was thick and warm, lined with soft fur, and it smelled of pine and wood smoke and something wild. It smelled like him. "Thank you," she murmured, too surprised to say anything else. "You're shivering," he said simply, as if that explained everything. They walked for another hour before the trees parted to reveal a castle unlike anything Ilara had ever seen. It rose from the mountainside like it had grown there, all dark stone and towering spires, windows glowing with warm light against the night sky. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was home to a king who claimed she was his mate. The guards at the gate bowed low as they approached, their eyes widening when they saw Ilara. She clutched the cloak tighter around herself, suddenly aware of how she must look. Dirty, dishevelled, a beggar girl wrapped in a king's clothing. "Summon Helena," the Lycan king commanded as they passed through the gates. "Have her prepare the queen's chambers." The queen's chambers. Ilara's stomach lurched. "I'm not. You can't." "You are my mate," he said, guiding her through a massive entrance hall lit by 100 candles. "You will have rooms befitting your station." "I don't have a station. I'm no one." He stopped walking, turned to face her. In the candlelight, his features were all shadow and gold, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "You are not no one," he said quietly. "You are everything, and I will spend however long it takes to make you believe that." Before she could respond, a woman appeared, middle-aged, with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. She took one look at Ilara and clucked her tongue. Poor lamb, half frozen and starved by the look of her. She shot the Lycan king a reproachful glance. Did they not even feed her before sending her off to die? "Helena," he said, a warning in his voice. "Don't you Helena me, Kale. I've known you since you were a pup." She turned back to Ilara with a warm smile. "Come, dear. Let's get you into a hot bath and some proper clothes. You look like you're about to collapse." Ilara glanced at the Lycan king. Kale, apparently, uncertain. He nodded once. "Go with Helena. She'll take care of you. I'll have food sent to your rooms." His jaw tightened. "We'll talk more tomorrow, when you've rested." She should have felt relieved to escape his presence. Instead, she felt strangely bereft as Helena led her away, up a winding staircase and down a corridor lined with tapestries and torches. The queen's chambers were larger than the baker's entire shop. A fire crackled in a massive hearth, casting dancing shadows across walls hung with silk. The bed could have fit 10 people, piled high with furs and embroidered pillows. A copper tub sat before the fire, steam rising from water that smelled of lavender. Ilara stood frozen in the doorway, unable to move. "It's all right, dear," Helena said gently. "It's overwhelming, I know. But you're safe here. The king would sooner cut off his own arm than harm his mate." "He doesn't know me," Ilara whispered. "How can he be so certain?" Helena's expression softened. The mate bond is not something that can be explained. It simply is. He has waited centuries for you, child. Centuries. And now that he's found you, nothing in this world will make him let you go. She helped Ilara undress, making sympathetic noises at the bruises on her wrists and the old scars on her back. Marks from the baker's belt when she'd been too slow, too clumsy, too present. Helena didn't ask about them. Ilara was grateful for that. The bath was heaven. Ilara sank into the hot water and felt something loosen in her chest. Some knot of tension she'd been carrying for so long she'd forgotten it was there. Helena washed her hair with gentle hands, combing out the tangles, murmuring soft words that Ilara couldn't quite hear. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a robe softer than anything she'd ever touched, a tray of food waited on a small table by the fire. Roasted meat, fresh bread, cheese, fruit. A bowl of something that smelled like honey and spices. More food than Ilara had seen in months. "Eat," Helena urged. "You need your strength." Ilara ate. She tried to pace herself, to maintain some dignity, but hunger won. She devoured everything on the tray while Helena laid out a nightgown on the bed, white silk, delicate as a spider's web. "The king chose it himself," Helena said, noting her stare. "Years ago. He's always kept the queen's chambers ready, hoping one day his mate would arrive." Something twisted in Ilara's chest. She didn't know what to do with that information. Didn't know how to reconcile the monster from the stories with a man who kept a nightgown waiting for a woman he'd never met. "Why me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "I'm nothing. I have nothing. I can't give him heirs or alliances or—" "You give him you," Helena interrupted firmly. "That's all he wants. All he's ever wanted." She patted Ilara's hand. "Rest now. Things will make more sense in the morning." They wouldn't. Ilara was certain of that. But she let Helena help her into the nightgown, let herself be tucked into the enormous bed like a child. The sheets were cool and smooth against her skin, the pillows impossibly soft. She should have been terrified. She was in a monster's castle, claimed by a king she didn't know, surrounded by wolves who could tear her apart with a single bite. But as sleep pulled her under, the last thing she felt wasn't fear. It was warmth. And for the first time in 7 years, Ilara slept without nightmares. The nightmares returned on the 3rd night. Ilara woke, gasping, her heart slamming against her ribs, the taste of smoke and ash thick on her tongue. In her dreams, she had been 12 again, watching her parents' bodies burn on the plague pyres while the villagers held her back. "Let me go. Let me go with them. Please." She sat up in the massive bed, trembling, her silk nightgown damp with sweat. The fire had burned low, casting the room in shifting shadows, and for a moment she didn't know where she was. Then she remembered. The castle. The Lycan king. The mate bond she still couldn't bring herself to believe. 3 days. She had been here 3 days, and still she kept expecting to wake up back in the baker's storeroom, cold and hungry and alone. But every morning, Helena arrived with breakfast. Every afternoon, Kyle invited her to walk with him through the castle grounds. Every evening, he dined with her in a hall that could have seated 100, asking her questions about her favorite foods, her favorite colors, whether she preferred books or music. He never touched her, never demanded anything, never even raised his voice. It was maddening. Ilara pulled her knees to her chest and pressed her forehead against them, trying to slow her breathing. The nightmare clung to her like cobwebs, fragments of memory she couldn't shake. Her mother's face, her father's hands, the smell of burning flesh. A knock at the door made her flinch. Ilara, Kale's voice, low and concerned. I heard you cry out. Of course he had. Lycan hearing. She had forgotten. I'm fine, she called, her voice steadier than she felt. Just a dream. Silence. Then, may I come in? She should say no. It was the middle of the night, and she was wearing nothing but a thin nightgown, and he was a king who claimed she belonged to him. But something in his voice, something careful and quiet, made her answer differently. Yes. The door opened slowly. Kale stood in the doorway, wearing only loose trousers, his chest bare, his hair tousled from sleep. In the dim light, he looked less like a fearsome king and more like a man woken by worry. His golden eyes found her immediately, scanning her face, her posture, the way she clutched her knees like a shield. Whatever he saw made his expression tighten. You're shaking. I told you I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. He crossed the room and knelt beside the bed, putting himself below her eye level. The gesture was deliberate, she realized. He was making himself smaller, less threatening. Will you tell me what you dreamed? Ilara looked away. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. Why? The word came out sharper than she intended. Why do you care? You don't know me. You don't know anything about me except that I was thrown at your feet like garbage. She expected him to flinch, to get angry, to finally show her the monster she kept waiting for. Instead, he simply said, Then tell me. Something cracked inside her. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was 3 days of kindness she didn't know how to accept. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, like she was precious, like she was worth kneeling for. My parents died when I was 12, she heard herself say. The plague took them both in the same week. I watched them burn on the pyres with all the others. Her voice caught. I wanted to burn with them. I begged them to let me. But they wouldn't. They said I was young and strong and would survive. She laughed bitterly. Survive. As if that's the same as living. Kyle didn't speak. He just watched her, his golden eyes soft in the firelight. After that, no one wanted me. I was just another mouth to feed, another orphan in a village that already had too many. The baker took me in because I could work, but he made sure I knew I was nothing, less than nothing. She traced a finger over her wrist, where the scars from years of burns and cuts had faded to thin white lines. I learned to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible, to never want anything, because wanting only led to disappointment. She finally met his eyes. And then they chose me as the sacrifice, and I wasn't even surprised. I always knew I would end up as nothing, a body in a white dress offered to a monster. The silence stretched between them. Ilara braced herself for pity, for empty reassurances. For the moment, he would realize she wasn't worth the trouble and send her away. You're not nothing. His voice was rough, almost angry, but the anger wasn't directed at her. You're not nothing, he repeated, reaching up to cup her face in his hands. His palms were warm, calloused, impossibly gentle. You're not garbage. You're not disposable. You are the most precious thing I have ever found, and every person who made you believe otherwise deserves to suffer for it. Tears burned in Ilara's eyes. She tried to blink them back, but they fell anyway, sliding down her cheeks and over his fingers. I don't know how to believe that, she whispered. I know. His thumb brushed away her tears. You've spent years learning that you don't matter. It will take time to unlearn it. But I am patient, Ilara. I have waited 3 centuries. I can wait as long as you need." He leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead, a kiss so gentle it made her chest ache. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with something fierce and tender. "You are not broken," he said quietly. "You are a survivor, and you are mine. Not because I claimed you, but because fate itself decided that you were worthy of a king." Ilara stared at him, her heart pounding, her thoughts tangled. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever looked at her like she was something to be treasured rather than tolerated. "Kyle," she breathed, and his name felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way she hadn't expected. His eyes darkened at the sound. "Say it again." "Kale." He made a low sound in his throat, something between a growl and a groan. His hands slid from her face to her shoulders, steadying her, grounding her. "I want to kiss you," he said, his voice strained. "Properly. But not tonight. Not when you're hurting and vulnerable and might regret it in the morning." "I might not regret it." "You might." He smiled, rueful and warm. "And I refuse to give you any reason to doubt me. When I kiss you, truly kiss you, it will be because you want it with your whole heart, not because you're grateful or confused or lonely." He released her and stood, taking a step back from the bed. The distance felt like a loss. "Try to sleep," he said. "I'll stay outside your door until morning. Nothing will hurt you while I'm here. Not even your dreams." He was almost to the door when her voice stopped him. "Kyle." He turned. "Thank you," she said softly, "for listening, for being nothing like I expected." His smile widened, showing a hint of the wolf beneath the man. "I intend to keep surprising you, Ilara, for the rest of your life." He closed the door behind him, and Ilara lay back against the pillows, her heart still racing, her mind still spinning. She was falling for him. She knew it now, could feel it like a current pulling her under. The terrifying Lycan king who knelt beside her bed and wiped her tears and refused to kiss her until she was ready. She was falling, and she didn't know how to stop. She wasn't sure she wanted to. The delegation from Thornhaven arrived on a grey morning, 1 week after Ilara had been sent to die. She was in the library when she heard the commotion. Voices raised in the courtyard below, the clatter of horses, the sharp bark of guards demanding identification. She set down the book she'd been reading and moved to the window, her heart stuttering when she recognized the banner flying above the approaching party. The village crest. A thorn bush wrapped around a shield. They had come for her. No, that wasn't right. They had sent her as a sacrifice. Why would they come back? She found out soon enough. Kyle was already in the great hall when she arrived, standing before his throne with his arms crossed and his expression carved from stone. Beside him, his captain of the guard, a scarred Lycan named Ronan, watched the visitors with undisguised contempt. The head elder stood at the front of the delegation, his ceremonial robes pristine, his silver hair gleaming in the torchlight. Beside him was a younger man Ilara didn't recognize at first. Then he turned, and her blood went cold. Marcus, the baker's son. He had been 20 when she was 12, newly married and eager to take over his father's shop. He had never been cruel to her exactly, but he had never been kind either. He had watched his father beat her and said nothing. He had eaten meals she cooked and never thanked her. He had looked through her like she was furniture. Now he was looking at her like she was a prize. "Ah, there she is," the head elder said, his voice dripping with false warmth. Ilara, my dear, we were so worried about you. Kale's eyes cut to her, then back to the elder. Worried. The word was flat. Dangerous. Of course. When we heard rumors that our sacrifice had been spared, we came at once to investigate. The elder spread his hands. Surely you understand, Your Majesty. We must ensure that the treaty is honored. If the sacrifice was not accepted, she was not a sacrifice. Kale's voice dropped to a growl. She is my mate. Silence rippled through the hall. The elder's smile faltered. Your mate, he repeated slowly. The orphan girl? The beggar? The woman fate chose for me. Kale stepped forward, and even from across the hall, Ilara could feel the power radiating from him. The woman your village treated like refuse and threw away. The elder's composure cracked. We meant no disrespect, Your Majesty. We didn't know. How could we have known? He recovered quickly, his smile returning. This is wonderful news. A union between our village and your kingdom. We should celebrate. You should leave. But surely, you sent her to me expecting her to die. You dressed her in white and bound her wrists and left her alone in the cold. Kale's voice was quiet now, which somehow made it worse. You do not get to celebrate. You do not get to claim her. You get to leave my territory and pray I never have cause to visit Thornhaven. The elder's face reddened. He opened his mouth to argue, but Marcus stepped forward first. Forgive me, Your Majesty. His voice was smooth, practiced. But perhaps we should let Ilara speak for herself. She was one of us, after all. She has family in our village. A home? Ilara almost laughed. A home, as if she'd ever had one. I have no family, she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. My parents died when I was 12. Your father worked me like a mule and beat me when I displeased him. I slept in a storeroom and ate scraps. She met Marcus's eyes. That was not a home. That was a cage. Marcus's expression flickered. Ilara, be reasonable. You can't truly want to stay here. With him. He gestured at Kyle. He's a beast. A monster. You belong with your own kind. Something shifted in Ilara's chest. A week ago, she might have believed that. A week ago, she had expected Kyle to devour her. But she had seen who he truly was now. She had felt his gentleness, his patience, his fierce and tender heart. She looked at Kale, really looked at him, at the king who had given her soft beds and warm food and never asked for anything in return, at the man who had knelt beside her bed and held her while she cried, at the wolf who guarded her door through the night because she'd had a nightmare. Monster? No. He was the first person in 7 years who had treated her like she mattered. I'm not going back, she said. Marcus stepped closer, reaching for her arm. Ilara. He never touched her. Kale moved faster than her eyes could track, placing himself between them with a snarl that echoed off the stone walls. His eyes blazed gold, his canines lengthening, the wolf surging beneath his skin. Touch her, he growled, and I will tear your arm from your body. Marcus stumbled backward, his face pale. The elder grabbed his sleeve and pulled him toward the door. We'll go, the elder said quickly. We meant no offense. Clearly, Ilara has made her choice. They fled. There was no other word for it. The delegation scrambled out of the great hall like rabbits escaping a wolf's den, and within moments, the thunder of hooves announced their departure. Silence fell. Kale stood with his back to her, his shoulders heaving, his hands clenched at his sides. Slowly, the tension drained from his body. When he turned, his eyes had faded back to their usual gold, and his expression was carefully controlled. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have lost my temper. I didn't mean to frighten you." "You didn't frighten me." He blinked. "I nearly shifted in front of you. I threatened to dismember a man who treated me like property." Ilara moved toward him, her heart pounding. "You defended me. You protected me. No one has ever done that before." "Ilara—" "I'm not going back," she said again, stopping in front of him, close enough to touch. "Not because I have nowhere else to go. Not because I'm afraid or grateful or confused." She reached up and placed her hand over his heart, feeling it thunder beneath her palm. "Because I choose to stay. I choose you." His breath caught. "Do you mean that?" "I mean it." She rose onto her toes, bringing her face closer to his. "I want this. I want you. With my whole heart." Kyle stared at her for one endless moment. Then his control shattered. He kissed her like a drowning man gasping for air. His hands cupped her face, tilted her head back, and his mouth claimed hers with a desperate tenderness that made her knees buckle. She grabbed his shirt to steady herself, and he responded by wrapping an arm around her waist, pulling her flush against him. The kiss deepened. Ilara had never been kissed before. Not like this. Not with passion and reverence and the unmistakable promise of forever. She felt it in her bones, in her blood, in the place where his heart beat against hers. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cale pressed his forehead to hers. "Mine," he whispered. "You're mine." "Yours," she agreed. "And you're mine." He laughed, a sound of pure, disbelieving joy, and kissed her again. They were married beneath the full moon, 1 month after Ilara had walked into the forest, expecting to die. The ceremony was held in the castle's inner courtyard, surrounded by torches and wildflowers and hundreds of Lycans who had come from across the kingdom to witness their king take his queen. Ilara wore a gown of deep silver silk, embroidered with tiny wolves that seemed to run along the hem when she moved. Helena had woven moonflowers into her hair, and around her throat hung a pendant Kyle had given her that morning. A wolf carved from black obsidian, its eyes set with chips of gold. "My mother's," he had said, clasping it around her neck. "She would have loved you." Ilara had cried. She seemed to do that a lot now, crying from happiness instead of sorrow. It was a strange and wonderful change. The ceremony itself was brief. Lycan weddings, she had learned, were not about elaborate vows or lengthy rituals. They were about the bond, the moment when two souls recognized each other and chose to intertwine forever. Cale stood before her in the moonlight, dressed in black and silver, his golden eyes shining with a tenderness that still made her breath catch. He took her hands in his and spoke the ancient words. "I claim you as my mate, my queen, my heart, in this life and whatever comes after, until the stars fall and the moons go dark." Ilara's voice trembled, but she didn't falter. "I accept your claim. I give you my trust, my loyalty, my love, in this life and whatever comes after, until the stars fall and the moons go dark." He kissed her then, in front of the entire kingdom, and the crowd erupted in howls that shook the night sky. Wolves sang their joy to the moon, and Ilara laughed against Cale's mouth, overwhelmed by the sheer impossible wonder of it all. She was queen. She was loved. She was home. Later, in the quiet of their chambers, Kyle held her against his chest and traced lazy patterns on her skin. The fire crackled low, casting warm light across the tangled sheets and discarded clothing. "Are you happy?" he murmured against her hair. Ilara smiled. "I didn't know it was possible to be this happy." "Get used to it." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I intend to spend the next several centuries making you smile." "Several centuries?" "You're my mate now, bonded to me." His arm tightened around her. "You'll live as long as I do. We'll have lifetimes together, Ilara. Hundreds of years to love each other." The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like a promise. "I love you," she said softly. The words still felt new on her tongue, fragile and precious. She had never said them to anyone before, never had anyone to say them to. Kyle shifted, rolling her onto her back so he could look down at her. His golden eyes blazed in the firelight. "I love you," he said fiercely. "More than my kingdom, more than my crown, more than my own life." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "You are everything, Ilara. Everything I never knew I needed." She pulled him down and kissed him properly, and for a long time, neither of them spoke at all. 6 months later, news reached them from Thornhaven. The village had fallen on hard times. Without the Lycan king's protection, withdrawn the moment his mate was threatened, the wild packs had grown bold. Livestock vanished in the night. Travellers disappeared on the roads. The crops failed, and the winter was brutal. And the villagers who had once thrown Ilara away like garbage now huddled in their homes and wondered where they had gone wrong. The head elder, desperate, sent a formal apology. A grovelling letter that begged the Lycan king's forgiveness and requested a renewal of the treaty. Kale read it aloud to Ilara over breakfast, his expression carefully neutral. When he finished, he set the letter down and looked at her. "What would you have me do?" Ilara considered. 6 months ago, she might have urged mercy. She had spent so long trying to be small, trying to forgive, trying to make herself palatable to people who would never accept her. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She was a queen. She was loved. And she had learned that some people didn't deserve forgiveness. "Let them face the consequences of their choices," she said quietly. "They threw me away because I was convenient, because I was alone and no one would miss me." She met Kyle's eyes. They were right. No one in that village mourned me. No one came looking for me. They celebrated when I was gone. Then they can continue to face the consequences. For now. Ilara picked up her tea. Perhaps in a year or two, when they've truly understood what they lost, we can discuss new terms. But they will never be forgiven. And they will never forget that the worthless orphan they sacrificed became their queen. Kachel smiled, slow, proud, fierce. "Have I mentioned lately how much I love you?" "You mentioned it this morning, and last night, and approximately 17 times yesterday." "Not nearly enough, then." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I love you, Ilara. My mate, my queen, my heart." She squeezed his fingers, her chest full to bursting with a joy she still couldn't quite believe was hers. A year ago, she had been no one. A beggar girl sleeping in a storeroom, eating scraps, praying for death. She had walked into the forest expecting to be devoured by a monster. Instead, she had found a king who knelt at her bedside and wiped her tears. A home where she was cherished instead of tolerated. A love so vast and fierce it had rewritten the very stars. They had chosen her to be a sacrifice, and he had chosen her to be his queen. Some endings, Ilara thought, were really just beginnings in disguise. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of fated mates, fierce kings, and the love that conquers all. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload, and leave a comment telling me, what would you do if a Lycan king claimed you as his mate?